Okay, so real quick, we're going to be talking about Mark chapter 2, verse 7, and does this prove Jesus is God? So very quickly, Mark chapter 2, verse 7 says that Jesus forgave sins, and the Pharisee says, who else can forgive sins but God? The problem with the Pharisees, or the problem with this verse, the problem with Mark chapter 2, verse 7, if any Christian wants to prove this proves Jesus is God, is that no verse in the Bible says only God can forgive sins. In fact, we read the exact opposite. In fact, we read in John chapter 20, verse 23, Jesus granted his disciples the ability to forgive sins. So, Jesus wasn't the only one who could forgive sins. So we read this in the New Testament. Like nowhere in the Bible, nowhere in the Old Testament, and nowhere in the New Testament does it say only God can forgive sins. So although Jesus had the ability to grant sins, if the Gospel of Mark is to be believed, Jesus granted the disciples that same ability in John chapter 20, verse 23. So Jesus wasn't the only one with the ability to forgive sins. He gave his disciples the ability to forgive sins. So that doesn't make somebody God, according to the New Testament itself. The conclusion here is that Mark chapter 2, verse 7 proves nothing. It doesn't prove Jesus is God, because if the Pharisees were right and only God can forgive sins, then God, Jesus, and the disciples were all God, because they all had the ability to forgive sins. So forgiving sins is not something unique to Jesus. The disciples were granted that ability to forgive sins, and we all know that the disciples are not God. So Mark chapter 2, verse 7 proves nothing in that, according to the New Testament itself. Stay tuned. More videos debunking the divinity of Jesus coming up ahead.